Harry is a biomedical engineer with over 15 years of experience at the intersection of orthopedic research and development and regulation, specifically post-market surveillance. He's authored 89 peer-reviewed publications and delivered over 160 scientific presentations. Does this count as 161? He has also previously been awarded significant funding for an MHRA-endorsed post-market clinical follow-up study, and he previously led the implant science studies at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital and was an honorary associate professor at UCL. And so now Harry is the healthcare sector lead at BSI, and we're very excited to have him present the masterclass today. So I'll let him take over from here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I've got a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to get straight into it. I'm just going to move you out of the way. Okay, fantastic. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session on digital health and AI standards. So over the next hour or so, I'm going to talk you through the regulatory environment for digital health and AI, both in the UK and the EU, and explain how the standards ecosystem has evolved to support safe, effective, and trustworthy innovation. So we'll look at how these regulatory frameworks intersect with internationally recognized standards, why those standards matter, and how they form really the backbone of compliance of software as a medical device and AI-driven healthcare technologies. I'm also going to walk through the current landscape of available standards, what's emerging, and how innovators can practically navigate the requirements, which are quite complicated and evolving. And finally, we'll explore what I think are probably some of the common challenges that companies face when developing and trying to certify AI-enabled medical products, and what a possible roadmap for compliance could look like. So, next slide. Okay. Now, so I joined BSI 2 months ago from, as Sonia said, from a background in orthopedic engineering research, and I'm still amazed at how large an organization it is. Our main office is in London, but we have a presence across 31 countries in the world, and publish amazingly around 3,000 standards a year across all different sectors. I must also thank my colleagues for their expertise in helping me to put together the contents of these slides. So just a bit of background on BSI. We are the UK's national standards body, meaning that we represent the UK perspective at the European and international levels when it comes to developing standards with other countries. Importantly, BSI, we don't develop standards ourselves, but we bring together committees of experts who help to write and shape what they should look like. And this can be at the national level or all the way up to the International Standards Organization level. So this sort of overview of what I'm going to cover, you'll hopefully have seen, and I think I'm going to skip through this just to get back a bit of time. But to make sure we're all aligned, I will first define a few key terms. So when we talk about digital health, we're referring broadly to software, data and technology designed to improve the delivery, management, or understanding of healthcare. So this covers anything from clinical decision support tools to patient-facing apps, remote monitoring systems, and workflow automation. AI medicine refers to algorithms, which are often machine learning models that attempt to replicate elements of clinical reasoning, such as pattern recognition, prediction, classification, or risk stratification. So these systems may support clinicians, automate routine tasks, or provide new insights that will be difficult to achieve manually. Software as a medical device, or SAMD, is software that performs a medical purpose without being part of a hardware device. So this can include diagnostic tools, apps that inform treatment, or software that drives clinical decisions. So if the software's output influences diagnosis, monitoring, or therapy, it almost certainly is or will be regulated. And as you all know, AI is no longer this emerging concept in healthcare. It's already widely deployed, and it's really rapidly being increased in its use or in its development. Certainly, in the US alone, there are well over 1,000 AI-enabled medical devices that have been authorized by the FDA, with the field of radiology, as you probably expect, leading the way. In Europe, a growing number of AI-enabled systems have received CE marking under the new MDR, and these tools help with triage, imaging backlogs, detecting pathology earlier, or helping to reduce some of the administrative burdens. So this rapid adoption, I think, demonstrates two things. Firstly, AI does provide real clinical value. And secondly, regulators and standards bodies such as BSI must keep pace with both the opportunities that are there and also the real risks that can be presented. And so the early wave of these technologies has significantly shaped the regulatory reforms that we've seen and we will see, and the standard development activities that are going on today. So, I mean, these tools demonstrate clear clinical value, whether it's by increasing efficiency or speeding up some of the things I mentioned on the patient triage side. But the main point here is that they need robust oversight. AI systems are highly sensitive to data quality, the training methods used, to the clinical context, and even how they're implemented. So, and as you all know, errors, bias, or model drift can directly impact patient outcomes, and the visibility of these risks has pushed regulators to develop more detailed guidance on software, on data governance, and AI-specific hazards. And so this early generation of approved AI systems has really played a critical role in shaping the strategies that we're seeing, and hoping to identify potentially where the real gaps are in standards, and really forcing us to think about how to address these to ensure that AI is safe for patients. So turning now to where we are with regulation, and the UK in particular is really continuing to evolve. So let's start there. So the UK medical device framework is governed by the UK MDR medical device regulations from back in 2002. These regulations are based on the old EU directives, which we kept following Brexit, and they still form the foundation for software as a medical device and AI medical device regulations in the UK currently. But the MHRA is currently running a multi-year program to modernise these rules across all medical devices and in AI as well. And so the reforms aim to update classification, strengthen software-specific requirements, and bring UK expectations in this space closer to international best practice that we're seeing in across Europe and in America. And it's important to note that the CE marked devices are still accepted in the UK during the transition period, and I think probably will end up seeing that it's indefinitely accepted, but let's see what happens there. And so this, at the very least, provides some degree of continuity for manufacturers, but it also does mean that developers need to stay on top of potentially two systems if it really does happen. So the current UK framework and the upcoming changes when they are implemented. So the UK up until now has deliberately taken a different path from the EU, just to be different. So when it comes to AI specific regulations, so rather than creating a single AI Act, which you've seen in the EU, the UK has adopted a principle-based framework where sector regulators, so the MHRA for healthcare, interpret and apply cross-sector AI principles. So these principles focus on safety, transparency, fairness, accountability, and contestability. And so the idea from the MHRA is really to stay flexible, allowing the UK to respond quickly to emerging technologies without sort of locking itself into highly prescriptive rules. And so for healthcare, this means that AI is primarily managed within the existing regulatory system at the moment, supported by targeted guidance from the MHRA. And so this guidance can include things on algorithmic transparency, data quality, change management, and the whole conversation around locked versus adaptive algorithms. So over the years, the MHA has been, I think, especially proactive through its software and AI as a medical device change program. And so this program was designed to update the regulatory approach to software and AI in a systematic way. So it included new guidance such as Project Glassbox, which focuses on transparency and explainability and trying to reduce bias. And it also introduces the concept of app classification of certain types of software, so helping to ensure that high-risk systems receive the appropriate levels of regulation. Another important element in all of this is adding some clarity to borderline products. So, for example, helping to determine when a wellness application crosses the threshold into being truly regulated as a medical device. And so these classifications are obviously essential for innovators because they will reduce the ambiguity and help clarity for developers as to when requirements from the regulatory side will apply. So to complement this regulation, the UK also introduced innovation pathways really designed to support the safe adoption of AI. And so one example is the AI airlock, which is the sandbox, the AI sandbox used by the MHRA. And so this gives developers the opportunity to work with the regulator on real-world testing of AI medical devices in the controlled settings. And it allows identification of safety concerns earlier on before full market approval, whilst at the same time giving innovators clearer insights into what will be expected of them from a regulatory perspective. Another pathway is the Innovative Devices Access Pathway, or IDAP. This helps accelerate clinically promising devices into the NHS by offering coordinated support from the regulator, from NICE and the health system. And so I think really these pathways have shown up until now that the UK strategy is not simply about regulating AI, but hopefully about enabling responsible innovation and trying to reduce some of the barriers to access, but also promoting safety at that early stage. Now, this is all in the context that in September, the MHRA launched the National Commission into the Regulation of AI in Healthcare. And this, I think, marks an important intent from the UK to begin to move from what has been primarily guidance in this space to essentially developing a more structured regulatory reform. And so this is likely to include increasing the risk category of certain AI medical devices and certainly a deeper scrutiny of the AI lifecycle. As of now, the Commission is advisory, but we should expect to see the first details of at least an intended framework coming out from the MHRA by the middle of next year. So, in the UK, we're definitely in a time of change, and of course, inevitably some uncertainty as things continue to develop and evolve in the UK. Now, I'm going to move across to the EU and outline how the new MDR governs software and AI. So, as you all know, the MDR is one of the most stringent I think regulatory frameworks currently in the world. So it's significantly tightened expectations for clinical evidence, for post-market surveillance, and lifecycle management compared to the old directives.
It's gorgeous girl. Gorgeous girl.
Please go on mute.
Okay, you're on mute. For software specifically, MDR Rule 11 introduced a major shift in approach. So under this rule, software used for diagnosis, for monitoring, or treatment is always classified as Class 2A or higher. And so what this means is that most AI-enabled diagnostic or decision support systems now require independent review by a notified body in Europe. And so this shift reflects really a recognition that software and in particular, AI-driven software can directly influence clinical decision-making and patient outcomes. And so the MDR really therefore ensures that these technologies are treated with the same level of scrutiny as are traditional medical devices. Now, the EU has also taken a very different approach from the UK by introducing a dedicated horizontal law for artificial intelligence, which is the EU AI Act. So unlike the MDR, which specifically focuses on medical devices, the AI Act covers all AI applications across every sector that exists, so from finance to policing to healthcare. It uses a risk-based framework, and within that structure, any AI system that is also a medical device is at the moment automatically categorized as high risk. And so being labeled high risk triggers a set of mandatory requirements covering accountability, data quality, transparency, robustness, and ensuring human oversight in all of this. And so it's important to note that these requirements apply in addition to MDR, not instead of it. So the AI Act really represents what is, I suppose, the most comprehensive attempt globally to regulate AI. And because healthcare is considered a high-stake sector, it's inevitable that medical AI really sits at the center of all of this. So let me talk a bit about what the AI Act actually requires from high-risk medical AI systems. So firstly, there's strong expectations around the quality of training, validation, and test data. The AI Act demands evidence that data sets are relevant, that they're representative and free from errors or biases that could undermine safety. And this is particularly important for healthcare where, say, demographic imbalance in training data could potentially lead to harmful sort of disparities in performance. Secondly, the Act requires detailed technical documentation. So developers must explain how their model was trained, what data sets were used, what risks were identified, and how these risks were then mitigated. So the document must also contain documents that are system logic, performance limits, and potential failure modes. And thirdly, the Act mandates transparency and ensuring human oversight in this process. So users must understand the system's intended use and its limitations so that they're able to intervene when it's necessary. And finally, the Act introduces post-market monitoring responsibilities, so requiring ongoing tracking of performance and certainly reporting any serious incidents. So for medical AI developers, the introduction of the AI Act means that compliance now happens, as I say, on two fronts. So with the MDR and additionally the AI Act. So this dual compliance is more than just sort of an admin burden. It means that technical documentation must address both device-specific safety and then also AI-specific accountability. So, for example, a company must satisfy MDR requirements and clinical evidence, whilst also satisfying AI requirements on data governance and transparency. So a key practical implication is that many products will now require two conformity assessments. So most developers will need a notified body that is designated for both regulations, so for both MDR and the AI Act, for them to complete both reviews. And I think even some Class 1 software products that previously required self-certification may now fall within the scope of notified body review in Europe if they incorporate AI, which automatically means that they are a high-risk definition. So all of this won't come into force all at one time. It's a phased implementation to give industry some time to transition in Europe. So high risk obligations begin coming into effect from 2026. I think it's August 2026, and then they'll expand from there. And so this means that manufacturers should not wait until this deadline approaches, as you know, we all have learned from MDR. They should begin aligning this process with the expectations of the AI Act now, I think. And importantly, the post-market monitoring obligations will mature over time. So developers will need systems in place for capturing real-world data performance, for detecting drift, and responding to safety issues in the field with the software. And so, as I say, the stage rollout gives manufacturers time to adapt, but the direction this is going is quite clear. The EU expects medical AI to be developed, validated, and monitored, with a level of rigor of scrutiny that matches what is the clinical impact of using the software. So I think although the UK and the EU currently differ in regulatory style, and we'll see what direction the UK takes moving forward, they certainly both align internationally through participation in organizations at the ISO level to International Standards Organization level, and at the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So these bodies develop globally recognized standards that all of these regulators will rely on. And this collaborative process helps avoid, that the case of excessive divergence between different regulators. So even where specific regulations differ, I think standards are an opportunity to provide a shared technical foundation for manufacturers to build on. And so for developers, this means that building products in alignment with international standards can significantly reduce friction when entering multiple markets. And regulators globally are drawing on really the same set of standards to guide expectations for safety, performance, and for life cycle management. Now, I want to just spend a bit of time talking through the standard development process, really from a more broader level, not necessarily on AI specifically, but the concepts really apply to everything. So first of all, just being clear on what standards are. So broadly across all sectors, they are an agreed way of doing something. So standards can be about making a product or managing a process or delivering a service. And they're consensus-based, so they're developed by experts who share a common interest in improving how things are done in their particular area. And ultimately, standards represent the distilled wisdom of what good looks like, helping to make things work properly and improve the way organizations do things. And of course, as you know, standards are not regulation, but they are an important tool used within that regulatory space. So regulations are based on legislation. The adoption of these is mandatory for a device to be used. They're developed by a regulatory authority, which is usually at the government level, so the MHRA, for example. And they tend to set out the minimum legal requirements of a product to be used. In the US, for example, regulations refer to specific standards which must be followed. Whereas in the UK and across Europe, there's a presumption of conformity if a certain number of standards are considered, and I'll explain a bit about that in a bit. Standards, on the other hand, are voluntary to follow. Your manufacturer doesn't have to follow them if they don't want to. As I say, they're established by consensus. They're based on the results of science, and they can be supported by guidance on how to perform some of the testing and even how to understand the standard themselves. And really, they're there ultimately to be used to demonstrate compliance with regulations. So there are different types of standards that come into use too. So these could be a specification which sets out detailed requirements to be satisfied by a product or a material or a process, and the procedures for checking conformity to these requirements. You can also have a code of practice, which gives recommendations for accepted good practice, bringing together really the results of practical experience and acquired knowledge from experts in the field, or a guide, which is often needed, which contains advice on how to apply another standard correctly. And finally, a test method, which really sets out a detailed procedure for performing an activity, such as measuring a quantity or determining a characteristic. And just a quick note on harmonized and designated standards, and just clarifying the differences between them. So harmonized standards are technical standards that are developed and recognized by the European standards organizations at the request of the European Commission. So once the standard is published in the official journal of the European Union, it becomes an official harmonized standard under EU regulations. So if a manufacturer complies with a harmonized standard, they are presumed to meet the corresponding legal requirements of the EU regulation. And a designated standard is essentially the British version of this, where again you gain a presumption of conformity with a regulation if you follow a standard that's on this list by the MHRA. Now, one of the things I learned when I joined BSI, which I didn't know before, is that anyone can propose an idea for a new standard and submit it to BSI. And so these are all reviewed by expert panels set up by us. And essentially, once the standard development process begins, BSI assigns a project manager and a technical expert drafts the scope of the document, so the scope of what that standard could potentially look like. And during this, the team performs due diligence by looking at other existing standards and publications to make sure that there's no overlap with anything that's already out there. We form a technical committee of experts who together review the first draft and resolve technical comments along the way. And the standard draft then goes out for public review, for public consultation, really targeted at experts with an interest in the subject for feedback from them. Comments from the public review are addressed by the committee, and a final draft is then created, which then goes on for publication. Now, just a note on the term consensus, which ISO defines, and I'll just read out in full. The general agreement characterized by the absence of sustained opposition to substantial issues by any important part of the concerned interests about a process that involves seeking to take into account the views of all parties concerned and to reconcile any conflicting arguments. So what it means is achieving consensus in this standard writing process means that so trivial objections in a committee are unlikely to gain support. But if there are sustained and justified objections to a part of the standard by a committee member, they must be considered. So essentially, consensus does not always imply unanimous agreement with the final version that has been written. And really lastly, to emphasize here that it's not BSI that writes the standards, but it's the group of experts that work with us that do. And these are members from all backgrounds, but with a common interest in the subject area. So it's I appreciate it's a cheesy line, but it's true that and for everyone listening, if you're not in the room, if you're not on these committees, you're really missing the chance, I think, to shape what your standards could look like. So, giving you an idea of how these are developed, I'm going to go through now, and having covered the regulatory context, I'm going to go through into some of the key standards themselves. So I'll start with some of the foundational standards, which may apply more sort of broadly to all medical devices, but are certainly relevant and important when considering AI and software as a medical device. And we start with the big one. We start with the foundational one, so ISO 13485. So this standard is, as I'm sure you all know, the internationally recognized quality management system standard for medical devices. It sets out the organizational processes and the controls that manufacturers must have in place across the entire life cycle. So from design and development to production to post-market surveillance and decommissioning. For digital health and AI developers, this is often the most significant shift needed. So I think many early stage technology companies are used to moving fast and iterating quickly. That's the cliche there. But this standard requires more sort of structured processes, documented decision making, traceability, and change control. So I think even at a very early stage, adopting 13485 helps ensure that development activities they're controlled, the evidence is captured, and design decisions can be justified. And of course, regulators, so the MHRA in the UK and across the EU, will accept a functioning QMS to be in place before any formal review begins. And without it, it's really going to cause a lot of delays on the developer side. Next core standard is 14971, which governs risk management for medical devices. So this standard is essential because, as we know, risk management sits at the center of every regulatory system. 14971 requires manufacturers to identify hazards, to estimate and evaluate associated risks, to implement controls for these, and verify that these controls are effective. Importantly, risk management it's a life cycle activity, so it begins at the very start of development, and it continues throughout all stages through to that post-market level. So for AI systems, risk management must extend to hazards that are unique to machine learning technology. So, for example, the things that I've mentioned already, so data bias, poor generalizability, drift in the model, and potentially unintended correlations that result in the algorithm in the software behaving in a way that you wouldn't necessarily predict. So these AI-specific hazards complement the traditional risks that are already considered under 14971. And really, I think the message is when implemented well, risk management becomes the unifying thread that will connect your data governance to your software development, to your clinical evaluation, and ultimately your deployment of your software. Now, there's a few of these. I'm going to just keep going through them and see how far I get with time. So 62304 is the internationally recognized standard for software development lifecycle of medical devices. So for AI developers, it provides the structure needed to turn a machine learning model into a regulated medical product. So the standard requires developers to define software requirements, architecture design, implementation, testing, and maintenance procedures. It also mandates rigorous documentation of verification and validation activities, and clear traceability from requirements through to the results of testing. Now, in the AI context, this means that model development, including training, tuning, versioning, and dataset selection, must be treated as part of the formal software lifecycle. So developers must maintain clear traceability between models and between data sets and the training parameters and their respective outputs. And many technology teams, and this is probably an unfair statement, but the cliche is that many technology teams really realize that perhaps the agile workflows don't necessarily map to how stringent this particular standard is. So additional structure is often needed. Nevertheless, I think this standard is really key because it ensures that clinical software is safe, it is reliable, and it is maintainable. So I think it is a core standard to be considering. I'm going to skip through some of these. You will have the slides available just to keep things moving along, but cybersecurity is another thing to be considering, and these are really some of the core standards that I wanted to cover. What I will do now is spend some time focusing on AI specific standards and some of the emerging frameworks that we're seeing in this particular space. Now, this standard here is one of the most, I think, influential AI specific documents that's currently available. It acts as an extension to 14971 and focuses on risks that are introduced specifically by AI and machine learning technologies. So this technical information report provides detailed guidance on identifying and mitigating AI-related hazards, such as the bias and the drift that we spoke about, and sort of disparities in performance issues, and things such as instability during training. It also highlights challenges around transparency of data or transparency of workflow, and the difficulty that there really is in sometimes interpreting model behavior. And this has been adopted as a British standard, so it came out of America and was a sort of collaboration with America, and is widely viewed, I think, as representing what is the emerging state of the art here for standards. So I think we'll see that many regulatory submissions will now use it as a basis for AI specific risk management. The 5259 series focuses on again a crucial element of AI safety, and it's something that I've mentioned quite a few times now, which is the quality of your data set. So these standards define what high quality data sets look like by establishing characteristics around accuracy, completeness of data, consistency and representativeness. They also describe processes for documenting the data sets, evaluating their suitability for specific uses, and maintaining quality over time. So for medical AI, this is particularly important because, as we know, data quality directly affects safety and performance. In Europe, the AI Act also places a really strong emphasis on data governance, and this series of standards provides that the structure needed to meet those expectations, and really following these standards helps to ensure developers that they really fully understand the strengths and the limitations of the data sets that they're working with as they build their models. Now, as I keep saying, also bias is one of the most, I think, serious risks in AI development, and this standard provides structured methods for evaluating bias. And so this is a technical report which explains how to identify different types of bias in your system, so including sampling bias, measurement, relating to the algorithm, and deployment. It also outlines techniques for measuring and then mitigating these issues. So for healthcare applications, we know the impact of bias and how serious it can be. And so a model that works well for one demographic group but poorly for another could contribute to unequal care or potentially even clinical harm. And so I think we'll see that regulators are increasingly and will increasingly expect developers to conduct really careful bias analysis and demonstrate that they have strategies in place to mitigate that. And this standard really gives developers, again, a practical, internationally recognized framework for addressing some of these concerns in a transparent way. So next, I want to turn to a standard that focuses specifically on how we evaluate the performance of machine learning models. So this technical specification provides really key statistical methods for evaluating classification algorithms, which are key for medical AI. regulators will want to see more, or see more than just accuracy. They really want to see and will expect to see structured evaluation of sensitivity, of specificity, of negative prediction values, calibration, and really other measures that reflect the reality of a clinical setting. This standard here really highlights the importance of choosing the right performance metrics for the intended use. So, for example, a screening tool must minimize false negatives, whereas, say, for example, a triage tool may prioritize early detection, even potentially at the expense of additional false positives. And again, by standardizing how developers measure and report performance, this standard supports clearer communication with regulators, with clinicians, and with notified and approved bodies. And so it just brings that consistency to what could otherwise be quite a fragmented approach to validation. Another one here, I've got quite a few to work through, so I'll see when I stop talking about these. But another important piece of work is 6061. Let's call it. I never know how to pronounce these different standards. And so this particular one addresses degrees of autonomy in medical systems. So this has been around for a while, and although most AI today is assistive, rather than, of course, fully autonomous, this report potentially anticipates what a future where autonomy increases. So the document here can help to provide a structure for categorizing systems based on the level of independence from human decision making, and also explores really the safety implications associated with each level of autonomy. So this is, I think, highly relevant, quite important for AI developers, because we will see that regulators want to understand how much the system influences clinical decisions and what level of human oversight remains necessary. And as I say, particularly with the EU AI Act, human oversight and maintaining that is key. And it's inevitable that even small changes in the level of autonomy of a product will have major impact and consequences on the regulatory challenges faced. And so, whilst the majority of AI systems currently require that oversight, I think this framework will become increasingly important if, and I think when, AI expands into more autonomous roles within areas such as diagnostics and monitoring, and potentially even treatment planning. So this is quite important. So I think one of the biggest challenges facing regulators and developers is how to manage AI systems that learn and update over time. And so, of course, as you know, traditional regulatory frameworks assume that medical devices are locked at the time of approval, meaning that the version approved is the version that's used clinically and will continue to be used clinically. However, as you know, machine learning systems benefit from continuous improvement, and that creates a bit of a tension, a bit of an issue. And so this is where standards such as 8183 and emerging guidance on what good machine learning practice looks like, and this is where they really come in. So this standard provides a structured data lifecycle framework, ensuring that data collection, preparation, training, and monitoring follow really consistent and transparent processes. And some of the work around the good machine learning practice introduces expectations around drift detection, version control of your software, and reproducibility of model training, and a way to handle controlled change management. So I think what we're seeing is that together these sort of standards and guidance documents provide an early structure of what is likely to evolve as regulations evolve for particular managing adaptive AI. And I think this will inevitably help developers prepare for the future of regulation, for those future regulatory models, such as predetermined change control plans, which do allow, I think they're being used in the US, which do allow for safe, pre-approved updates to software that is adaptive, without necessarily requiring full new certification. So I think I'm going to skip through this one. This one I'll talk about because it came out from the work of BSI. And so I think, although many AI standards are the international, the combination of many countries working together, we are seeing national level standards emerging, and we're seeing them here in the UK. And one example of this is the British standard 30440, which in the UK provides a structured validation framework for AI in healthcare. So this particular standard addresses a range of issues around data quality, bias assessment and clinical validation, and also usability and post deployment monitoring, so really the entire life cycle. And because it provides detailed practical requirements for AI assurance, we're starting to see that it's slowly being adopted and being used within the NHS procurement processes as a benchmark for evaluating AI products. Although it came out in the middle of 2023, it really needs a lot more awareness for it to be adopted nationally, and really for the benefits of it to be realised. And I think that the relevance of this standard goes beyond the UK. Many organisations and manufacturers outside the UK have shown interest in this because it offers really a practical, real-world, directly implementable framework. It really helps the bridge that gap between high-level, complicated, sometimes difficult to understand international standards, and really on the shop floor, the practical expectations on healthcare buyers and on regulators. So I think what we're seeing now is that rapid growth of an ecosystem of AI standards, some that are very specific to AI, or some that are being adapted or revised to really cover AI and the specific challenges of it. And so clearly, while a few years ago the landscape was really dominated by traditional medical device standards, today we are seeing standard documents that are more AI focused and covering risk and data quality, and lifecycle management and even ethics. And we're at a stage where really many of these are still in development, but some of the early drafts that are coming out are helping to influence the way that regulators are thinking about their approach. And I think regulators increasingly expect developers to, I suppose, to anticipate, to align with some of these emerging standards, even before they're formally published. And so I think what this really sort of reflects is that there's this rapidly expanding ecosystem is in an environment that is very complex with AI in terms of how quickly it's progressing, adapting, and AI introduces risks and behaviors that traditional rules were really not designed to manage. And so the standards community and my colleagues that are working on this are really working to define what good practice looks like in this new context. So I've covered a bit on what exists and what's emerging, and I think it's important just for yourselves to be continuously updating yourself on that. And these emerging standards that you will see coming out matter for several reasons. Firstly, they address gaps that traditional medical device standards don't cover, and these gaps have direct implications for patient safety. And secondly, as I say, these emerging standards will help to create that international alignment with the different regulators across the world. So if we get to a stage where multiple jurisdictions, multiple regulators are really working from very similar standards, you as developers, if there are developers in the audience, will benefit from reduced duplication and clear expectations of really what to do. Now, seeing how far to skip ahead. Let me skip past this. Now, this what I'm going to do is very quickly just skip through this so you can see these, but you'll have the slides as a roadmap for innovators. So I put together a few steps on some of the practical things which I think a lot of you may already know. So I'm going to just go past this and for a few more minutes just talk about some of the challenges and pain points that I think exist in this space. And as I've mentioned before, I think one of the most significant challenges is in developing safe and effective AI medical devices that use high quality data. And I think one of the challenges is just obtaining high quality data. And so AI systems that are developed are fundamentally dependent on the data that they're trained on and validated on. And in healthcare, in the UK at least, that data is often fragmented, it's incomplete, it's inconsistent, or it's really siloed at different institutions and different hospitals. So high quality, well annotated clinical data sets suitable for regulatory scrutiny for AI developments are both difficult to obtain and if you can, they're just expensive. And I think at the moment, many hospitals lack the infrastructure for large-scale data extraction and curation at the level that's really needed. And of course, things such as privacy constraints can limit access to some of that patient-level information. I think importantly, demographic representation is often uneven, and I think it's inevitable that certain populations may be underrepresented, leading to bias model performance that doesn't really generalize across clinical environments. So it's something that regulators are and will continue to be increasingly focused on this particular issue. So they require developers to provide evidence that data sets are representative of the intended patient population. And it's beyond just a technical challenge. I think it's foundational. As we know, poor quality data sets will potentially lead to unsafe models, and these unsafe models will potentially lead to patient harm. And I think this is why it's so essential that data governance and data quality standards are really central pillars for both regulation and for assurance frameworks as they're developed. Bias and generalizability, I think I've touched on a bit, and I think you understand that. This is one challenge here. So explainability. So the ability to understand how and why an AI system generates its output. So as a clinician, for any clinicians here, clinicians are trained to interpret evidence to justify the decisions and understand the uncertainty in their decisions. So when they encounter an AI system that essentially behaves like a black box, the trust in that system is understandably limited. So if you're if I'm a clinician and I don't understand how a model works, you may either ignore it or rely on it inappropriately, and both scenarios are obviously a negative for patient safety. So the whole topic of explainability is also quite important from a regulatory perspective, and it will become more important as well. And so regulators will need to understand what your particular algorithm is doing, whether the behavior is predictable or repeatable, and whether the outputs are sufficiently transparent for high-risk AI systems. And so developers will be asked to provide information about the logic used by the system, being very clear on the limitations, expected performance, and as I say, the level of human oversight that is generally needed. And it's really essential to clinical acceptance and regulatory approval. I think so. I've got, Sonia, if you're there, I've got 10 minutes left
Yeah, I think we should move on to the Q&A.
before I need
If you
to
just
leave.
wanna...
So yeah, I've still got loads to
I
talk.
also want to say that we've got an explainability workshop coming up soon anyway. So if you want more information on that, everyone can join that one soon.
So I'll skip ahead, but you of course have all of these sites, and I suppose the only thing I'd emphasize is that if you can and you're able to and you want to, do get involved in some of the work that's happening on the standards development side of things. And from that, I will say thank you.
Great, thank you, Harry. I was making a note of all the questions that everyone was asking, and so we're going to try and just get through as many as we can. Could you mention how products are regulated in Northern Ireland versus UK-wide versus Great Britain only? Or direct people to the correct website for that?
Absolutely. So I should sort of preface this by saying I'm certainly not an expert in all of this. And of course I'm going to forget all of the key terms, but essentially my understanding is on the regulatory side that Northern Ireland follows the EU rules in the way that they regulate medical devices.
Okay, fantastic. Also, next question. Is dual compliance applicable in the UK regarding the EU Artificial Intelligence Act?
No, so I mean the EU Act covers the EU. So after us leaving the European Union, I think it's a case of let's wait and see what the MHRA come up with. I think what we're certainly seeing, I think what we're certainly going to see are two things. I'd be surprised if we don't end up in a situation where the MHRA definitely accepts the CE mark. So certainly if in obtaining a CE mark, a manufacturer's gone through the European process, which will require adherence to MDR and the EU AI Act. Yeah, that's one route in. But it may be that the UK and the MHRA really try and differentiate themselves potentially by focusing on some of the newer and innovative technology such as AI. So I think it's at the moment the answer is no, it doesn't apply because we're out, but let's see how things develop with the MHRA.
Brilliant, thank you. Regarding agentic systems, would these be covered in the IEC 6060141? Although I don't know if anyone's actually developing anything. at the moment.
That yeah, I'm not sure of where that's going.
Okay. How can people reach out to write a new standard? What kind of information do they need to bring to you?
So sorry, just repeat that more time.
How can people reach out to BSI to help write a new standard? What's the process that people would go through for that? And what kind of information would they need to bring to you to have that standard created?
Certainly. So there is and I haven't linked to it here, but there is a formal submission form on the BSI website, and my email is here. So certainly, perhaps if I afterwards share the information as to how to actually do that, that might be the most practical thing there for
Great.
that. To just make a note on the committee side of things. So certainly we encourage people of all different backgrounds to sit on the committees to help shape what they look like. And I suppose the one caveat is that just for conflict of interest, I suppose, we tend to not have specific industry members from specific companies that's in the committees, but they can still join the work of the committee if they're nominated by an association they're a member of. So, for example, BIVDA is the organisation for IVD in the UK, and they nominate a representative to sit on various committees.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Is there a list of all the ISOs available as a checklist, or is this incorporated in the framework's checklist?
In what context?
What is the context for that question? Shikta, are you still here?
I mean, perhaps I can answer it in two different ways. So, the MHRA now, with their, I always forget whether it's designated or harmonized, but which way around it is. But the MHRA publish all of the standards that have currently been designated, because these particular standards have been agreed, map and adhere to specific parts of regulation. So they're all published there. Beyond that, I mean, certainly BSI on their website, have a list of all ISO standards and filtering through that.
Okay, great. Thank you. How can the adopters of the innovation, so for example, the NHS, use these standards? Would it be a case of checking that products have met these standards, or should the checks and balances be more in depth?
Yeah, certainly. So I think one of the challenges at the moment is so the NHS has a system called the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, which is specifically for these type of products, which looks at a lot of things in terms of safety and data governance, and even cost effectiveness of these devices, which have already been CE marked. So they end up actually duplicating a lot of the tests and the checking of a product that will have already happened to that product once it's gone through its CE marking and UK CE marking. So I think at the moment, the NHS does do that. It really just repeats a lot of the work that's already out there for that. So one of the things that we're trying to think of at BSI is how can we help the NHS become more efficient in that, and really only focus on particular elements that are not covered by the already CE marked device. Which long-winded explanation, but I hope that makes sense.
No, that's perfect. And actually, one of the other questions has been answered by somebody else in the chat, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Could you tell us more about the expected process of reclassifying, particularly from like software or AI as a medical device from class 1 to class 2A? What would this sort of look like, and would a company need to exit the market or a product need to exit the market during that transition?
So that's really a question that we're going to need the MHRA to answer for us as to what their expectations are.
Okay.
In all of this. I think it's not clear. Certainly, what we've seen on in Europe is you know a big rush and a big sort of demand on notified bodies to suddenly start approving and assessing a large number of products, not just in this space, but in the MDR with the IVD changes, where a lot of IVD products could be self-certified previously. I think it was a statistic of 80% of all IVD products previously could be self-certified. Now it's that 80% have to have a notified body approval.
Perfect. We have 1 minute left with you. I wonder how quickly we could maybe cover Annex Z in EN harmonized / designated standards.
Not very quickly, or I'm
Not enough time.
the wrong person for that.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing that, Harry. Thank you to everyone for attending. However, as I always say, there's no such thing as a free dinner. So I'm now going to very kindly ask you to follow this link tree and fill out the relevant surveys for whatever position you're in. So this is either for those in the innovator space or as healthcare professionals. As I mentioned earlier, the work we do at Radiant is academic research around regulation to help innovators in the health tech space. And by filling out these surveys, they're not super short, we'll admit, but they are easy to do during a coffee break or a commute. I know some of you have to go away and commute quickly. And so the results will directly help provide insight to help develop our work. So please find the time to fill these out, and please share them onto your friends and colleagues and peers within this space too. We also have a Slack channel that you can join and share within our community of innovators and researchers, and also regulatory specialists. And please keep an eye out for our next masterclass sessions, which will be, we've got one coming up on risk management frameworks, or 2 coming up actually on risk management frameworks. And we also have one that I mentioned earlier about explainability and trust, which will be carried out by our very own professionals and academics. And so thank you again, and we hope to keep in touch, and I'll end the meeting now. Unless anybody has any burning questions.
Hi, Sonia. Can I just say, unfortunately, for some reason, I can't actually access the text. I just wanted to thank you, and particularly Harry, for going through the whole of that standards landscape. As the chair of 3440, I can say you really do, you only get what you get, what you put into it. So I actively encourage everybody to get involved in the standards process. But well done, Harry. That was quite a trip. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for attending. And yes, everybody keep in touch and join the next masterclasses that we'll be hosting soon. Okay, have a nice week, guys. Bye.
Bye.